So last week we were over in Judges chapter 11. We're going to go ahead and backpedal here to Judges chapter 6, and we're going to be going through about 3 chapters here. Like I said, we're going to have this week and next week, and I'm going to wrap up the book of Judges, and then Kelly's going to be up here with the book of James. So I want to wrap things up here in the book of Judges. We're not going verse by verse, but we're going to talk about some of these things. Maybe it's very similar to when you guys were going into the big picture on Wednesdays. It's kind of this overview. But we're going to look at Gideon, and we're going to look at the story of Gideon, and I'm going to bring out a few things, highlight a few things that perhaps maybe we never thought about before. But we have 3 chapters to get through, and I think we'll be able to do it. All right. In Judges chapter 6, notice what it says. Then the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. Again, as we notice, this is the trend. We have someone at the door there. We have Luann at the door. This is the trend throughout the book of Judges. They serve God, then they go away from God, then they cry out to God because God hands them over to their oppressors because of the sins that they're committing. And then God, He hears their cry, and He's willing and merciful and gracious enough to raise up a deliverer. He hears them, and He sends these judges. And here we have again another cycle. The children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. And notice, who did He deliver them into? Whose hand? Midian. Now, if you remember, I know it was a little while ago, but do you remember with Deborah and Barak? Do you remember who delivered Israel out of the hands of, the king of, lost it here. The king of Hazor, yeah, the Canaanite king. And then he had a commander named Sisera. Do you remember who killed Sisera? A woman in a tent. Now, her name is Jael. Now, notice, she was the wife of the Kenite, Heber. Now, Kenite may not mean anything to you, but this Heber, the Kenite, is a descendant of Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. So you got Moses' father-in-law, Jethro. Who is Jethro? What nation is he from? Yes, yeah. You can see how this follows in Exodus chapter 2, verse 16. Can you get that up there, Andrew, if you're able to? But Exodus 2, verse 16. I'm having computer difficulties, so who knows what's going to happen. Yeah, Exodus 2:16. All right. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water, and they filled the troughs to water their flocks. Now this is talking about Jethro. Do Numbers chapter 10, verse 29. Yeah, now Moses said to Hobab, the son of Reuel, now this Reuel is another name for Jethro. He's called both. And you see that throughout the scriptures. You'll see one, and you're going to actually see this today, that Gideon is given a nickname called Jerubbaal. And Reuel is also Jethro. They're the same person. And he is called the Midianite, Moses' father-in-law. So isn't it interesting, by the hand of Jael, you have her delivering Israel by the use of a tent peg, if you remember, that she put the tent peg through his temple. And now, here's this Midianite delivering Israel, and now God hands Israel over to their oppressors, the Midianites. Isn't that interesting how the Lord will work and bring who they thought was their friends, perhaps, because they helped them at one point, but now they become their enemies. So who does God send first? Who does God send to Israel at this time? They're crying out. The Midianites are against them. Who does God send? First and foremost, he sends a prophet. He doesn't send a judge this time. He sends a prophet first and foremost. Notice that they weren't being, a judge wasn't immediately lifted up, but a prophet needed to come and preach the word. Why? Because this cycle continues, you see, and the children of Israel are not realizing why they're being oppressed. They just keep thinking, well, we just keep going through life, and the next thing you know, oppressors come on us. What should we do now? Well, cry out to the Lord. He'll deliver us as he has done in the past from our oppressors, from those coming against us. But the prophet is sent to show Israel why you're being oppressed. They're losing sight of it. They're not realizing that it's not Midian necessarily that's oppressing them. It's themselves, because they refuse to obey God's voice. Chapter 6, verse 10 there. They refuse to obey God's voice. But nonetheless, after he sends this prophet, he goes ahead and he's raising up a deliverer, a judge. And who is this judge we're going to be talking about? Gideon. Gideon. Now, verse 11, now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth tree, which was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abizrite, while his son Gideon threshed wheat in the winepress in order to hide it from the Midianites. Notice there, what is he doing? Yeah. Right. He's doing this in hiding, and these wine presses are more underground in the cool, because you want your grapes and such to stay cool, and whenever you're smashing them up and putting them into wine vessels, you want to make sure that it all stays cool, like a cellar. And also, not to mention that even up there in verse 2, it says, Israel made themselves the dens, the caves, and the strongholds, which are in the mountains. They made these the places of their dwelling. They're hiding from these Midianites. They're so afraid of them, they're hiding from them. And so we see Gideon also hiding from the Midianites. He's scared. He's trying to hide his wheat, because what would the Midianites do? They would come up and they would destroy all their food and all their livestock, to starve out the Israelites. So Gideon is there in the winepress, hiding. He's threshing this wheat. And what does the Lord say to him when he appears to him? Isn't that interesting? Do you think the Lord's being sarcastic here? What does it mean to be valiant? What does it mean to be a mighty man of valor? Respected. The idea of also being brave in the face of danger. That's having valor, having courage. But do we see Gideon being courageous in this moment here? We'll be getting to that here shortly. But we see that this is the first instance we see of Gideon's example of being afraid. He's afraid of the Midianites, but the Lord sees in Gideon something that Gideon does not see in himself. How often is that the case? In our everyday lives, we see ourselves as helpless. We see ourselves as nothing, which in one sense is okay. For we should be humble and remain humble, and not allow ourselves to be prideful and think that by our own hand we can do anything, but that we must trust in the Lord. But we see that Gideon, he is afraid. He's not confident in himself or in his ability to really do anything but thresh wheat in a winepress. But the Lord sees in him, he says, "You mighty man of valor." And then he tells him to go. Go in this might of yours. He emphasizes that more. Go in this might of yours, and you shall save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Why? Have I not sent you? He's telling him, the Lord is with you. The Lord your God is with you. How mighty can you be when you know that the Lord is with you? So the Lord sees the valiancy in Gideon, but Gideon doesn't see it in himself. Notice Gideon's fear, number 2. So he wants to make sure that this angel of the Lord is truly the Lord. So he's wanting to bring him food, and he does. Now, I don't want you getting this confused, because I get this confused myself between 2 sacrifices here in the book of Judges. You have Gideon's sacrifice to the angel of the Lord, and then you have Manoah over there with Samson in chapter 13. You'll see Manoah's sacrifice to the Lord. They are very similar, but the details are somewhat different. Gideon goes and gets this, and he places this on the rock, and he pours the broth on it. And what does the angel of the Lord do? He reaches out his staff, touches it, and it immediately bursts into flames and is consumed. The bread and the meat. And then the angel of the Lord disappears. Now, what is Gideon's reaction to this? Like many people's reaction throughout the Bible. He's scared. I have seen the face of the Lord. What do we know about if you see the face of the Lord? You shall die. And God told this to Moses. No man shall see my face lest you die. So Gideon's saying, I've seen the face of the Lord, but how does the Lord respond to Gideon? He says, peace be with you. Do not fear. You shall not die. And he called the place there, he called it, the Lord is peace. So he was afraid of the Midianites, of course, rightly so, afraid that he was going to die because he saw the face of the Lord. But the Lord says, fear not, peace be with you. I'm going to use you. And then the Lord tells him to do what? He's got to go to his house. He's got to go to his father's house. And what's he commanded to do? Yeah, that's a little bit later here. We'll be getting to that here shortly. But this, yeah. So the first thing Gideon's got to do before he can lead Israel, before he can lead them in battle against the Midianites, before he can get Israel in order, he's got to get his house in order, doesn't he? We can see that even in the New Testament. Do we consider like the eldership and the leadership? How in the world can an elder lead the church of God, the children of God, if he cannot even lead his own household and keep his own household in order? This is what the Lord is showing Gideon. You need to go and get your house in order first, for your father has idols up. He has the Baal up, and he has the Ashereth next to it, the wooden idol. And he says, go tear down the Baal, build up an altar to the Lord in the proper order. And notice, take the Ashereth, which is the wooden image, tear it down, and use it as firewood. Use it as firewood to offer up a burnt offering of your father's flock. Now, as Gideon, he's ready to do this, right? He's ready to go. Is he? Yeah, exactly. This is fear number 3. We see that Gideon, all right, Lord, I will do as you've commanded me to do. Surely I will go tear down that Baal. Surely I will use that Ashereth as firewood and use my father's flock as a sacrifice. But I'm going to do it at night. Too afraid to do it at day. Scriptures make it a point to say that. He was too afraid to do it during the day, so he did it at night. And almost rightly so, because what was the reaction whenever they all came out in the morning? They saw Baal's destroyed, the Ashtoreths burned up. What's the town's reaction? What's his family's reaction to this? Yeah. Yeah. Who did this? And they find out it's Gideon, the son of Joash. Bring him out here that we may put him to death. And what does his father say? Joash say? He says, are you going to contend? Are you going to plead for Baal? If Baal's a god, then let Baal deal with Gideon. Some wise words from Joash. It makes me wonder, I don't know, but it makes me wonder if Joash is even really cares much about these idols or not. And as we can see how a leader can be influenced by those who follow him and his family. And he says, yeah, go ahead, do whatever you're wanting to do. But he obviously noticed Baal is nothing. If Baal has a problem, let Baal deal with it. And we see that Baal couldn't deal with it, huh? And here is an instance of a nickname given to Gideon. What is the nickname? Jerub-Baal. Which means, literally, let Baal plead. Let Baal plead. And this is a name that is taken on and used throughout the Bible for Gideon. It's a nickname that's embraced. When we see that Gideon did what God had commanded him to do, what was right, he embraced the nickname that was applied to him. That let Baal plead. Because he was willing to tear down Baal, and Baal could do nothing against Gideon. So he first of all had to get his house in order. And then after he got his house in order, notice what happens. The Spirit of the Lord comes upon Gideon. This is one of the few within the book of Judges and throughout the Bible that it says the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. And then he musters together Manasseh, which is his own tribe. He musters together the Abazirites. Now, these are his own family here. His own family that was basically wanting to kill him. Now they're actually mustering together to follow him. And now Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali. They're all mustered together. Now we have here the fleece. This test of the fleece in Gideon's 300 is probably one of the most famous out of